a noxious cloud descends on Manhattan, mutating the population and cutting the island off from the rest of the world. Generations on, the surviving population exists amid the rubble of modernity, wearing cast-off clothing, worshipping celebrities as past gods, and using emojis in place of written language. Every neighborhood is its own kingdom, 1,000 armies with Molotov cocktails and scrap metal spears. Below the surface, the city is a bomb waiting to explode, and now the first tourist in centuries has arrived to strike a match. That sounds pretty good. Let's talk about it. Hey beasties, welcome back to the channel. It's me, it's Triple B, your friendly neighborhood bearded book beast. And I am so excited you're here today for this book review, my first long form full book review I've done on the channel. Look for more short book reviews like the one for Holly Dark to keep popping up as time goes on. But once in a while, especially my weekly reads and my tomes that I read every month, I'll do a long form book review. Usually newer books or books that I feel like haven't already got a ton of reviews, or maybe older books that you just don't see reviewed much. Something that I can add to it and kind of give a fresh look on it. But yeah, so this is my review for Tomorrow's Children by Daniel Polansky. What is it about? Tomorrow's Children takes place in Manhattan, on the island of Manhattan, and it is in the future after a noxious cloud of gas came out of nowhere. Nobody knows where it came from, what caused it, but it came in, ravaged the city, killed a lot of people. Those who survived, by breathing in the funk, which is what the gassish cloud is called, the funk, by breathing in the funk, they developed some superpowers, you could say, some strength, some speed, some mental stuff like telekinesis, psychic stuff, controlling others' minds, moving things with your mind, things like that, all to various degrees. But if you breathe in too much of the funk, it will kill you hideously, basically destroying you from the inside out and turning you into a pile of goo and slop. So you don't want to breathe in too much. It's a death sentence if you're in the cloud for too long. And this cloud is all around the island of Manhattan, but it's also hovering above, about at the 13th level of a tall building. So all the characters that live there is kind of two factions. The rich people, they've kind of I have some notes here. So if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. But they've barricaded themselves in the fortified enclave, which is in the heart of the city. It's fortified, very safe. It includes Central Park, and that's where the most powerful people on the island live. The mayor, they're called the mayor, the pope, and the commissioner, and they are in charge of all the rich people that stay in the enclave. Then outside of the enclave, it's become kind of a fend for yourself, kill or be killed type of thing. There's different factions and gangs that have formed. Each one has their own flavor, you could say. They use different kinds of weapons. They have different beliefs, and they have their turf that they protect. They have different clothing and uniforms they wear, different ways they style their hair, and different things they eat, different things they live their life, different ways they live their life. But they each have their own turf. They all have really funny, cool names. Like some examples are the Burners, the Bulls, the Brawlers, the Alphabet City Anarchs, the Ogres, the Maulers, the Harlem Hellions, the Honey Swallowers, the Destroyers. So there's a lot of different gangs out there. And they stick to their turf, and if you encroach on their turf, they will kill you. Sometimes they war against each other to try to steal turf or resources from other groups. So this is all going on the outside. Uh, it reminded me a lot of, it's very Mad Max-ish in that way. Ever seen the 1980s movie The Warriors or played the old game? That's a lot like that, where a group of young gang members, clan like that, has to get across the city and everyone's trying to kill them. Uh, had that kind of a feel too, which was very cool. In this world now, uh, it's been generations since the funk came, so hundreds of years. People have gotten used to living this way. They're very far removed from regular society like we have now. Food is mostly grown, so they grow a lot of vegetables and fruit and things like that. But there is some meat that they eat and is sold at some places, but it's mostly dog, rat, and pigeon meat. Those are the three animals still kind of alive and that can be found, but they are getting harder and harder to find. So that's a delicacy. And they no longer have a written language. They they their speaking language. There's some slang words they'll use and things like that, such as daytime is called the bright, nighttime is called the dim, guns are called booms. They make black powder, homemade black powder to use in their guns. They call swords and knives cutters, so things like that. But then their written language is actually just all emojis. So if you go to a restaurant, the sign above the restaurant or a store or a market will be things like a rose and I'm trying to think of an example from the story, but like if it was a black rose and a bull, it'd be the black rose bull, something like that. But everything's emoji. They write things to each other. It's in emojis, which is pretty interesting. I thought that was funny to think about. But so that's kind of the world is set up. So in the outside of the enclave, there's all these gangs warring, and there's one gang in particular that's highest up. They kind of loosely control everything, and there's the head of that group, of that gang, kind of runs the show. Kind of think of like the Kingpin, or um, trying to think of something else from comics or superhero movies or shows. The Governor from Walking Dead, just that kind of a character who's a criminal mastermind, who's kind of risen up and runs the show. So very early on in the book, this is not a spoiler, but it just sets off the plot. But early on in that book, that group, that gang, and their leader are just all executed and killed by this group led by a character called the Kid. And the Kid has this group with him. One character is A.L. or Ale, A-E-L, Isle, A-L. He is one of my favorite characters in the book. Just very loud, and kind of the way he talks reminds me of like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. Just very funny. And he has a hype bird with him, which I don't quite understand, but it's basically this bird that's always flying around, can help him during fights, but also just really hypes him up, like, Isle's the greatest fighter ever. And they just call it a hype bird, but Isle is like an aspiring assassin and killer. He loves killing. He sees it as like his greatest strength and what he wants to do. He's very like a big barbarish Conan type character, but dresses wild, like very wildly and vivid, vibrant. So he's a really cool character. And the Kid also has Chisel with him, who is as tough as nails. Female protagonist who just doesn't really get close to anybody, but is tough as nails, and her and the Kid are pretty tight. And he has some other people in his group, but those are the three main ones. And they take out this gang, take out this leader, and that kind of kicks off the mystery of why did they do it? Who are they? What gang do they belong to? Who hired them to do this? And they also have these bombs that they're going to plan to set off around the city, and they're just causing all this anarchy, uprooting all this stuff. Nobody knows what's going on. All these, now that main gang and the leader is gone, people are vying for power, and it's kicking off war, and things are just crazy. So the Pope and the commissioner and the mayor, they get together and they decide to hire a former warrior, lone gunslinger type to be the sheriff. Sounds like maybe at a time she used to be, but so they hire Jillian to do this, to come out of retirement and do this. So she makes a deal with them to do it, even though she doesn't really want to. She'll try to figure out what's going on so the whole city doesn't implode. So because of course these higher ups, they don't want to go out there. So that she gets her own team together. You've got Swan, who's another character I love, who's a world-renowned city-renowned assassin, just very famous. And he is a really good killer, but he doesn't really like killing, and he deals with that grief and the heaviness of being expected to do that, and he deals with it through drugs and alcohol and has a substance abuse problem, and for a lot of the story, he's under the influence of something or passed out drunk. And then you've got Marilyn Slim, who has some psychic telekinesis powers. He always refers to himself as Marilyn Slim in third person, and he can control people and make them do things they don't want to do. He's very cool. And then gosh, I can't say it. Ariadne. Ariadne. I just always knew who it was when I read. I haven't really tried to say that name out loud. Ariadne, I think it is. Ariadne. But she lives kind of in the subways with this gang group of people that live in the dark. You know, they're like very rat-like or crocodile-like. Some of them can go in the water. And they're kind of creepy, you know, very pale, big eyes, you know, because they don't go out in the sun much. And yeah, so she's part of this group that she gets from this gang to help her because they all agree that they need to try to figure things out before it gets out of control. So you've got Jillian trying to match wits in this cat mouse game with the kid in his group and her group, and then they're in the middle of it is all these different gangs warring with each other and trying to seize power. There's all these mysteries about who did this, who did that, and then there's also a couple more characters. There's a lot of characters in this book. We'll get into that. But there's a couple other characters that play a part. There's Mr. Simpson, this person that comes along who seems to have come from the outside somehow. There's a young boy. His name is Newton, who seems to have some kind of strong mental powers, and people are trying to hide him, and then other people are searching for him, and nobody really knows why or who he is. And then there's Nellie, who her chapters are very interesting because she is a spy who's trying to watch and see what's going on in the city, and she can see through cats' eyes. So it'll be the 9 lives of Nellie, and every time she's watching through what this cat, seeing through its eyes what's going on, and a lot of times that cat dies. And then the next time you see her again, she's looking through a cat, and just lots of mystery. You don't know what these groups want. There's lots of twists and turns, and it's just a great story trying to Anyway, that's what the book's about. So let's get into each section and give you my score for each of those sections, and then we'll wrap up at the end and talk about what I thought about the book overall. All right, I will give you a quick rundown of how I do my scoring system. But if you have not yet, be sure to check out the video that runs through how I do my reviews if you want a more detailed understanding of how I do it. So, real quick, I score out of 5 stars, 3 parts to it. 5 stars, a point system out of 5.0. And also then, based on that, the book is either if it's a 0 to 1, then it's a clean-shaven book. If it's a 1 to 2, it is a stubble book. If it's a 2 to 3, it's a mustache book. 3 to 4, it's a goatee. 4 to 5, it's a full beard book. And if it's a 5.0 perfect score, it's a beastly beard book. And that's what Howling Dark was. If you haven't watched that short review, it was a beast beard book. So that's how I do it. but I separate it into 5 categories. We have world building, character work, plotting, dialogue, and prose. And then each of those gets out of 1.0 and out of a full star. So if it was 0.75, that'd be 3/4 of a star. 0.5, half a star. 0.25, a fourth of a star, or a zero. A zero would be a no star. And then at the end, I total up the points and stars, see where I land at, and then that's how we know what kind of book it is. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first off is world building. This has an awesome world. Daniel Polansky's really created a very interesting world set in a modern day city like Manhattan, but also as the backdrop, but then into the future after this post-apocalyptic thing happens. So it's ravaged and thinking about what would society be like for people that grew up all this time and lived in this world where this is the way it was. And it's very interesting, especially with the language, with the written language being emojis, with some of the slang, with all the different factions and groups, and how it's set up and how the rich people still try to stay away from it and continue living more like what they did before. And it's a very cool contrast between the two. So he has created an awesome world that I think is incredible, and it's very inventive, very imaginative, and I really enjoyed being in that world. So for world building, Daniel Polansky, Tomorrow's Children, gets a 1.0, a full star for world building. Then we have character work. The characters in this book were amazing. I loved the characters. I really loved the kid and Jillian, who were kind of the main leaders of each of the main groups you follow. But my favorite 3 characters were Swan, Marilyn Slim, and AL with the sight bird. And if I had to pick one as my favorite, I don't know. It'd be tough because I love them all. But whenever it was focused on Swan or Marilyn Slim or AL, I was just pumped. They were definitely my favorite, but I loved all the characters. They were really, really well written. I'll get into prose in a little bit, but this book is written in third person, but there's not any like internal dialogue. It's very quick chapters, and it almost is like you are. It's almost like you are just there. You're there watching what's happening. The way it's written, so you don't really get to get inside the head of the characters. You don't get to know them as well as I think you could if you did. I like first person narrative. I like third person narrative. So I don't dislike one or the other. But I think what was missing for me from the character work, I love the characters. They're very inventive, very fun. But what was missing was really getting inside their head to know what they were thinking. And that's a story choice, a writing choice for him. And I think that's something he also did in his novella, The Builders, which I love that book too, but that was something that I think was missing. So it's awesome. It's fun. But like I said, you just feel like you're there watching them, and you have to really pay attention to grasp, get to know the characters and understand why they do things, what they're thinking. You have to go based off of how they react to things, what they say, their facial expressions, their mood, because you don't get that internal dialogue and those thoughts to really understand what they're thinking. So for character work, because I love the characters and I think they're inventive and awesome and I will not forget them, it's very high, but because I didn't get that internal dialogue to really get to know them and sink my teeth into the character building, I gave it a 0.75 out of 1, which is a 3/4 star for character work. Then we have plotting. So this is a breakneck paced, very quick, lots of action. He writes a lot of short chapters. Sometimes the chapter will just be a couple words. Sometimes it'll be a couple sentences, a little dialogue. Sometimes you don't know what's going on because you don't really know where they're at. Like I said, you it moves very quick, but it doesn't slow down often to really build out or flesh out the characters of the world. You're dropped in and you're just along for the ride, like you're an observer. You don't really get inside of any of the characters or anything like that. There's no um, there's no real flashbacks to what happened before or how the world got to be this way, any of that. Um, but I was never bored, so that is a very good thing. And the action and fighting sequences he writes are great. He writes that very well, uh, and it really, there was so many twists and turns and reveals that were really exciting, and I really enjoyed. So he did a really good job with that. But I think I was not a huge fan of some of the super short chapters. Um, and I do wish there would be times, not where he slowed down a lot, because that's kind of how his books go. They're very quick paced. But I've been starting to read his Lowtown trilogy, with the warden, the main character in that, and in that book, you really get inside the head of characters more. There's a lot more slowing down to flesh out characters in the world, and I really love that. And he does that just as well. So I would have loved to see a little more of that in this book, and I hope that going forward, if this series continues, that he will do that so we can get to know these characters better. So, plotting wise, I thought it was really fun and quick, and a quick read, but I would love to slow down a little bit and flesh out some things more. So for plotting, I thought it was really great, but just not perfect. So again, a 0.75 or 3/4 star for plotting. Then we have dialogue, which I think was really good. Again, the banter back and forth between a lot of the characters was really good, and it was great how he used the slang, and put it into the story. Um, and yeah, I think the dialogue was really good. Um, and I can't say anything bad about the dialogue. He used some cool language that fit with the world. There was good banter between the characters. It was a lot of fun hearing them talk to each other, and it was just well done. So dialogue, 1 full star, 1.0, perfect score for dialogue. And then finally we have prose, and this will be the lowest area. He's a great writer, and I do enjoy his prose. But it's definitely not flowery or beautiful or anything. Very digestible, very quick, and fast paced. Sometimes a little too fast paced. I think his Lowtown trilogy, I think I would score a lot higher for prose. This is a lot more like The Builder, where it's short, gets to the point, um, but it also is, um, it's interesting. I will say it's I don't think it's bad, because even though, like I said, you're really just dropped in and you're an observer. There's no internal dialogue, no talking back to explain what happened in the world. You're along for the ride with this mystery, which is cool. You're with Jillian, trying to figure out what the kid's motives are, and why this group is doing this. You're along with the kid going to do these things, but he's not telling you why he's doing it. So it does really add to the mystery, which is kind of cool. So for that reason, it's good. It's a choice he made on purpose. And you have to kind of learn about the characters and how they're feeling and stuff based just on facial expressions, their replies in dialogue, um, their actions, and then use that to kind of pick up their mood and how they feel about things. And it's very interesting. You really have to pay attention, which it feels like you don't, because it's so fast paced, but you really got to pay attention so you don't miss things, and can understand what's going on, and learn more about these characters and who they are. But anyway, so for that reason, it can be a tough draw, I'm sure, for some people. But it is very fast paced and exciting. So, and his prose is very digestible. But with those kind of warring against each other, I landed right in the middle with a 0.5 or a half a star for prose in Tomorrow's Children. So if we add these all up, a 1.0 full star for world building, a 0.75 3/4 star for character work, a 0.75 3/4 star for plotting, 0.75 3 4 star for dialogue, and a 0.5 for prose. That gives us a total score of 3.75 out of 5, or 3 4 stars out of 5 stars. And that is a very solid book, very good book. Not quite a full beard book, but this is a pretty nice grizzly goatee book. It's right. It is Tomorrow's Children, Daniel Polansky. This is a goatee book. And I enjoyed it. It was really cool. I think if you haven't checked out Daniel Polansky, I would say read this book. It's a fun one, but I would recommend starting with his Lowtown series. But if you want a book, this has an ending that could be a standalone. He might come back to this world, he might not. It wraps things up very well. It doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger. So if you want a full story and to see if you like his writing, this would be a good place to start. I would say maybe even start with The Builders, which is a novella that I've talked about on the channel before, which was very good. Or even, what is the name of it? There's a short story that's kind of a prequel short story to The Lowtown. I would start that. If you look up on Kindle, Daniel Polansky, it's called A Drink Before We Die or something like that. But anyways, Daniel Polansky's a great author. I'm really enjoying his stuff. And Tomorrow's Children is a goatee book. That means it's pretty good, pretty solid. So, I hope you enjoyed this book review. Go ahead and leave me a comment down below if you've read this book or anything by Daniel Polansky. Or let me know what you've been reading and what you think. And if you want to use the Bearded Book Beast book rating scale to rate any books you've read, go ahead. That'd be fun to see what you get. Let me know if you've read any Beast Beard books or full Beast Beard books, or if you've read any solid goatee books. So that is all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. And until I see you next time, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't yet. And until I see you next time, be brave, be beautiful to one another. Be brave, be beautiful to one another, and be beastly. See ya.